Jump Force begins when a dark force rips multiple manga worlds from their place in the universe and sends them on a collision course with the real world, causing global destruction. Nearly killed in the midst of an attack on Times Square, you play a new hero dragged into battle after being rescued by Trunks. This lead-in is simply justification for you to create your new heroic avatar, customizing their design as you're reborn. The more you know about the subject at hand, the more you'll get a kick out of the editor tool, with assets such as hairstyles, eyes, and facial features cribbed from other characters. Initially, it's just their aesthetics, but as you progress, you'll be able to gain access to their signature moves, dubbed J-skills, and be able to add them to your own attack repertoire. Jump Force's story ultimately feels like a quick justification to bring together so many disparate heroes. With such a vast roster, it's perhaps understandable, but ultimately disappointing that the game rarely tries to do anything interesting with its characters, relying instead on "I've got to get stronger" tropes that anyone versed in these anime shows will be familiar with. Jump Force's biggest problem is that it doesn't quite seem to know whether it's a story-driven RPG or a fighting game. The story links each battle, and the battles move the story along by unlocking new characters to join the in-game Jump Force alliance, but you earn EXP for each brawl, and between them you'll buy upgrade skills, engage in side missions to level up your characters, and buy cosmetic items. There are dozens of stats and attributes to consider, and it's all a little overwhelming, especially when all I really wanted to do was slap the irritating grin off Ninja Boruto. Approach Jump Force purely as a fighter, avoiding as much of the story and RPG mechanics as possible, and it gives a better impression, but still a mixed bag. You can pick up free missions to play through solo, with set challenges to complete which help power up your character, or just jump into player versus CPU or PvP bouts, with support for online or local multiplayer. This, technically, is the meat of the game, with 3-on-3 tag battles pulling from the whole roster. On the plus side, its most basic controls creates a system where characters as disparate as sword-wielding heroes from Dragon Quest can clash with melee fighters from Fist of the North Star without having to worry about how they fit together. It's simply a mix of weak and strong basic attacks on square and triangle on PS4, and then throws on circle. Anything flashier or bespoke to a certain hero is done by charging energy by squeezing R2, and then selecting one of 4 moves from the face buttons. At this level, it works, it's accessible, and it's fun. The problems come when you try to master Jump Force's even slightly more advanced mechanics. Take something as simple as swapping team members, done with a tap of L2, except it's meant to be a tap, but frequently nothing would happen unless I held it down for a second or two. But holding down L2 for too long engages a team attack, which you might not want to do at that point. Then there's R1, which is generally block, except, as the loading screen prompt tells you, press R1 and you can hit an enemy's attacks to dodge it, a feat I don't think occurred once for me during my playthrough. In fact, dodging and blocking is a frustration, with successful evasions feeling like flukes. It's almost excusable not to be able to avoid an awakening move, the game's ultra attacks, especially as they're devastating but never one-hit KOs. But when extracting yourself from just a volley of regular blows feels impossible, it begins to grind. It's annoying because there's so much else to like in how Jump Force's fights work. It feels really like playing an action anime at times, in a way few other games have managed. Lightning flurries of punches and kicks are accompanied by flying dashes around the battlefield, while each character's unique moves are brilliantly incorporated and delivered with an iconic catchphrase. In Japanese, of course. Despite all of its clear flaws, I couldn't help quite liking my time with Jump Force. It's an ambitious brawler which suffers from something of an identity crisis. It will nevertheless delight anime fans, especially those of a vintage, to know some of the more obscure characters included here. And a bit more finesse on the controls, making them less complex and more responsive, would have elevated the whole experience greatly. But it's a solid enough experience with more than enough spectacle and strategy to satisfy. We give it 3 stars.